Coming up next, it's a subject we've talked about quite a few times on here, but it's one of those wonders. How does an artist or band blast onto the scene, hold the world hostage for several years, several hits, and then disappear as quickly as they came? Well, in 1988, this underground band took over radio with zero gimmicks and zero support from their label. It was all about their big songs. First one blew up the charts, had everyone singing along. Their second did the same. Then they had another big hit, and then poof, they went up in smoke and disappeared. I mean, from overnight success to commercial extinction. What led to the demise of this promising band? It's kind of sad. It's coming up next on Professor of Rock. Hey, music junkies, Professor of Rock, always here to celebrate the greatest artists and the greatest songs of all time. You know, if your memories of superheroes come from actual comic books and Saturday morning cartoons and not the blockbuster movies, you're going to identify with this channel. Nostalgia all the time. Make sure that you subscribe below right now. Get the stories from the legends. We also have a Patreon. You got to check that out. There you're going to find additional exclusive content, and you can even become an honorary producer to help us curate this hit music history. You know what time it is, folks. It's time for another edition of our series, Bottle of Lightning. It's one of my favorite shows we do on here. It's where we celebrate a song or an album that was king for a day or many days. Here we honor artists and bands that rocketed up the charts, but for reasons unknown, they weren't able to sustain that success. Most people call them one-hit wonders. I even mess up sometimes and do it. But I like to celebrate them instead as lightning in a bottle. Today, we're going to take a deep dive into the band Information Society. A band who barely missed the top of the charts with their hit song, What's on Your Mind, Pure Energy. Tell me what's on your mind. And after that, they actually had another top 10 hit. Their next single, Walking Away. Actually, for a short while, from 88 into 89, these guys were a global sensation. They seemed to have a lot of promise. And yet after their debut album, they all but vanished. We're going to try and figure out why and where they went. Here it is. Information Society was actually formed in 1982 in Minneapolis, Minnesota by friends Paul Robb and Kurt Harlan. During their early years, the band would go through a rotating cast of characters as they tried to nail down a stable lineup. 1985, Information Society released Creatures of Influence, but that record featured a short-lived appearance by Mirat Konar on vocals while Kurt took some time off from the band. Creatures of Influence contained the underground hit Running, which gained popularity with Latin audiences in New York and Miami. Find you, I'll never leave you now. Now, when Running started picking up speed in 1986, it grabbed the attention of producer Joey Gardner, who then actually pitched it to Tommy Boy Records. Now, with Kurt back in Information Society and Mirat moving on, Gardner remixed that track, and the single started to get airplay. So Tommy Boy signed the band with the newly recruited Amanda Kramer on keyboards and percussion. This would actually be the band's classic lineup going forward. However, when the band started to work on their debut album in January of '87, it was clear to Tommy Boy that they were dealing with a group of, let's just say, inexperienced rookies. And Information Society was going to need a lot of help to cut a good record. So what Tommy Boy did is they enlisted the help of Warner Brothers, who had recently purchased 50% of that label. Warner assigned the quartet to their label Reprise. That happened in April of '87. And by the end of the year, Information Society thought that they had the album finished and they were ready for release. However, that's when the bomb dropped. You see, for years, Information Society had been in the habit of sampling television shows in their music. One of their favorites was, of course, Star Trek, if you remember. I don't know why Reprise didn't address this much sooner, but when it was time to release the record, that's when the panic set in. Multiple tracks on the album featured samples from the 60s sci-fi television show, and Reprise didn't want to get sued.
It's worked so far, but we're not out yet.
I want to know what you're...
Back then, sampling was still a fairly new practice, and there was no legal precedence for TV personalities like Leonard Nimoy and William Shatner, to use their likeness or their voice.
Pure energy.
Information Society, though, they weren't having it. They were adamant that the samples had to stay. They called them integral, an integral part of their music. Said Kurt, "We never dreamed that putting recordings of Star Trek would ever matter because we're just this group of dorks from Minneapolis doing music." And, he had a point. Information Society had been a no-name underground band for like 6 years. It never occurred to them that anything they did would actually get notoriety. Regardless, though, Warner and Reprise hit the brakes on the album The Music. The album had been slated for a December 1987 release, right before Christmas. Now they were stuck in limbo. Warner actually did their due diligence. They asked Star Trek's parent company, Paramount, permission to use these samples. But apparently no one at Paramount had the time or inclination to bother or authorize them. So for like 6 months, nothing happened. Absolutely nothing. Breakthrough finally occurred when Information Society's A&R guy, Kevin Laffey, contacted a lawyer friend with connections. That friend's name was actually Adam Nimoy, the son of Star Trek's Leonard Nimoy. Adam asked his father to speak to Paramount, and Spock actually came through. Warner and Paramount cut a deal, and Information Society was cleared to proceed. The self-titled album was finally released in the summer, June 21st, 1988, by Tommy Boy Records and Reprise Records. Went to number 25 in the US and would go on to be certified gold by the RIAA. By this time, it's probably close to platinum. It's a big album. Information Society's first single, What's on Your Mind, Pure Energy. It was their biggest. And actually, it was one of the songs that sampled Star Trek. The Pure Energy subtitle came from a clip of Nimoy's voice in the 1967 episode Errand of Mercy.
Fascinating. Pure energy. Pure thought.
And at the beginning of the song, you can also catch DeForest Kelley, who played Dr. McCoy, saying, "It's worked so far, but we're not out yet."
It's worked so far, but we're not out yet.
I wanna know what you're...
According to Paul Robb, What's on Your Mind, Pure Energy, started out as a lengthy instrumental track. Apparently, the band didn't really know how to write radio-friendly songs at this time, so they just kept turning out these 10-minute instrumental jams. This, of course, didn't fly with their label reps, who were worried about the band spending too much time and money in the studio. So they told the group, you need to start producing results, real results.
Pure energy.
So Information Society put the instrumental marathons on the back burner at this point, and Rob started studying popular music, looking for inspiration. His goal was to learn to write irresistible hooks and songs that were, easy to sing to, easy on the ears. One song that he paid particular attention to was Peter Gabriel's Sledgehammer. This, of course, went to number 1 in '86. Another was Duran Duran's latest single, Notorious.
Notorious.
Rob studied Duran Duran a lot. He was a big fan of the harmonies. Paul Robb also mimicked new wave minimalists like Gary Newman and Devo, writing lyrics that said as little as possible.
It's not too late to whip it. Whip it good.
To my ears, Information Society always sounded like a techno Thompson Twins. But speaking of those minimalist lyrics, said Rob, you put lyrics in a song back in those days because people expected lyrics. You weren't trying to be a storyteller in the way that album rock songs were stories or narratives. At the time, we thought that's kind of what What's on Your Mind was, just sort of a random collection of emotional impressions. Although that was the intent, Rob admitted that when the song was finished, its lyrics did actually tell a story. The narrative is about people struggling to communicate with each other, With the help of his songwriting partner, Kurt Harlan, Paul describes someone who wants to figure out his partner's thoughts, but doesn't know how to do it. I can't see behind your eyes the things that I don't know. If you hide away from me, how can our love grow? Verse 2 is much of the same, but it is the catchy chorus that drives this message home. I want to know what you're thinking. There are some things you can't hide.
There are some things you can't hide.
I want to know what you're feeling. Tell me what's on your mind.
Feeling. Tell me what's on your mind.
I mean, ultimately, the simple singability of the lyrics combined with some energizing hooks and quirky samples like that cool drone of the phrase pure energy. That proved to be just what Rob was after. It's the making of a surefire hit. What's on Your Mind, Pure Energy spent a total of 25 weeks on the Billboard Hot 100, and it peaked at number 3 in the Hot Dance Music Club Play chart. It went all the way to number 1. But What's on Your Mind wasn't the only successful single that Information Society released. In total, they would actually issue 4 singles from their debut album. The next one, Walking Away, that reached the top 10 as well. It was released in late '89. It peaked at number 9 on the Billboard Hot 100. Like What's on Your Mind, Walking Away sampled Star Trek, but this time it was William Shatner's Captain Kirk saying, "It is useless to resist us."
It is useless to resist us.
And then Scotty calling out, "Let's go see." So according to Paul Robb, Walking Away went through a similar writing process as What's on Your Mind, Pure Energy. But it was about a very different topic. Apparently it was directed at a couple of former band members who would quit the group at a poorly chosen moment, right before Information Society started getting popular. Rob described Walking Away's lyrics as it's basically someone, complaining about people who left. It's a very transparent song. With the popularity of What's on Your Mind and then Walking Away, there was plenty to celebrate with this band. The funny thing is, no one expected Information Society to be at all successful. Not their band, not their management, and no one from Tommy Boy or Warner, their label. For Kurt in particular, who incidentally didn't want to be the lead singer, it was a seriously stressful time. In his words, he was the only one in the band who could sing worth a damn, so everybody else just made him do it. As Information Society's popularity grew, of course, caught the attention of MTV, who put them on the roster of Downtown Julie Brown's Club MTV tour.
The happening and the Information Society, what's on your mind?
About this time, Kurt realized that the band was being pushed hard into becoming a top 40 pop act. It was something that he wasn't really comfortable with, and would drive a wedge between him and his bandmates. Further complicating matters was a dark secret that the band would keep quiet for years, one that would lead to Amanda Kramer's departure just as they were starting to search. Recounting her exit, Amanda from Information Society said, basically they decided to kick me out because I was a heroin addict. So at the very end, they were all very upset about it. It was something I kept secret from them for a long time. It had been going on for years. It did start to interfere with the band towards the end. End of quote. Amanda's heroin highs and lows were an unexpected roller coaster ride for her bandmates and for her. According to her, the guys all voted her out because of it. In time, though, her ousting from Information Society led to even bigger opportunities. In 1989, Amanda joined the Golden Palominos and recorded multiple albums with them. I'm alive and living now. She also worked with 10,000 Maniacs, recording and touring the platinum-selling releases Our Time in Eden and MTV Unplugged. Amanda also spent time with the British group World Party, released solo records of her own, and then in 2002, Kramer became a permanent member of the Psychedelic Furs. After Amanda left the band, Information Society, they became a trio. But tension still remained within the band, particularly between Paul and Kurt. In Paul's words, they were both know-it-alls who wanted to control every aspect. Despite this, Information Society managed to put out 2 more albums before falling apart. Pretty good albums, I must say, as well. Their 1990 follow-up album, Hack, was a moderate success. However, the record's first single, Think, would be their last song to chart on the Hot 100. It topped out at number 28. Great song, should have been higher. It was after their third studio album, 1992's Peace and Love Incorporated, that both Paul and James Cassidy quit the band. Kurt Harlan, however, would continue under the Information Society moniker. He released Don't Be Afraid in 1997 and a compilation album, Insos Recombinant, in 1999. And some of you may recall, in 2004, Information Society was featured on VH1's Bands Reunited. Since then, though, Information Society has released even more albums. There was Hello World in 2014, the cover collection Orders of Magnitude in 2016, and then Oddfellows in 2021. However, none of Information Society's other albums would ever achieve the same success as their debut, but they do continue to make music. And you know what? A comeback is always possible, especially with the last few years of the explosion of synthwave. Man, I remember hearing Pure Energy, that's what I call it, on the radio for the first time. It was so catchy. I could sing it word for word after just one listen. I mean, it was permanently tattooed on my brain. I had to get this cassette tape. Well, this was right around my birthday, and so I saved all of the birthday money that I got in cards for my grandmas and grandpas and uncles and aunts, as well as some allowance, and I put together about $50, and it was burning a hole in my pocket. I had gone into the Music Land in the mall that was about 30 minutes away from where, I lived. Remember, this was well before digital music, and I lived in a very small town where outside of the top 15 or 20 albums, you couldn't really get any other kind of music. So for weeks, I begged for a ride to the mall, and I went to the mall 3 times, 4 times in 2 weeks. Every time I went in, though, they had just sold out of the 2 or 3 copies of the cassette or the vinyl of the album. And regardless of my begging and pleading with the clerk, they wouldn't hold a copy for me. They had some policy. So about a week later, I ran into the store to the I section because I'd been there so much before wanting the album. Just as I stepped over, I saw an older teenager slide the cassette in his plastic holder out of the I slot. You remember those plastic security devices or whatever that encased the tape inside? Anyway, he had the last copy, the only one there. I remember sheepishly telling him if he'd let me have it, I would double his money. I'm like, I'd give you $20 for it. He looked at me with this cocky glare. How much you got? That's what he said. Being a dumb kid, I said $50. He said, well, give me $50 and I'll give you the tape. Of course, I said, no way. He just shook his head and said, well, you lost. He started to walk up to the register, and of course I panicked. I had to have this album. So I'm like, wait, how about I give you the money to buy the tape, and then you give me the tape, and then you can just keep the change. He said, okay, all right, you got a deal. So I trustingly gave him my $50 bill, and he started walking up to the register. He started walking up really quickly. He then dropped the tape in the nice prize bin near the front of the store. Remember those? And he took off out of the store, booked it, Chased after him, but he's just too fast. I lost the $50 and I didn't get the Information Society tape. I walked back into the store and, fished the Information Society tape out of the nice prize bin. I stared at the colored band members on the front of the tape in pure anguish. Probably about a half hour later, my dad walked into the store and he told me, it's time to go. He could tell that I was upset, so he asked, what's going on? And I told him the whole story. I said, I was so stupid. And so he's like, why did you give him the $50? Why didn't you go up and pay for the tape? And I said, well, I was stupid. I felt dumb. I started walking out of the store with him. And he turned to me and said, I'll tell you what. The shop needs cleaned and the flower bed needs some weeding. And if you'll do both, I'll give you an advance. I'll pay you up front and you can get this album. I can tell that it means a lot to you. So we made a deal, and my dad was even cool enough to let me listen to Information Society all the way home, even though it was not his cup of tea. And he was like, what is this music? And all I could say was, Dad, it's pure energy. Leave us a comment about Information Society and this Bottle of Lightning classic album. What do you remember about What's on Your Mind, Pure Energy, and the band's other singles? They had so many good songs. They should have been so much bigger than they were. Let us know in the comments below. Share some of your memories. If you dig our content, make sure to subscribe below so you never miss out on our videos. We'd love to have you as part of our community, and check us out on Patreon. Until next time, 3 chords and the truth.